message is that the combination of pertuzumab, trastuzumab, and docetaxel as first-line treatment of patients with HER2-positive metastatic breast cancer has provided the greatest ever reported magnitude in disease-free survival. It is 6 months. Overall survival, it is 15 months in this population of patients. As such, this effect is unprecedented, and the study is the most positive trial in the history of breast cancer patients. The combo of pertuzumab, trastuzumab with chemo has been approved in HER2-positive metastatic breast cancer and undergoing neoadjuvant treatment. We have 3 combinations for that. The toxicity profile, especially the cardiac toxicity, actually is very much encouraging to use the combination without fear of the cardiac toxicity. Of course, you have to monitor the cardiac function as usual, but the fears are much less at the present time. And finally, have we optimized the use of anti-HER2 treatment during the last 15 years? The answer is partly yes. We now have optimized a little bit, at least for the first line and second line. We have more effective drugs and drug combination. We have more innovative trial designs. And we are a bit lagging in predictive biomarker, but at least we have one biomarker, very simple, which is estrogen receptor expression for the prediction of the benefit of the anti-HER2 treatment, at least in the neoadjuvant phase, but still remains drug accessibility should be crucial to all patients. Now, to this point, I wish to tell you something. We have succeeded during the last 2 years to convince Roche, and they actually complied to this, and they were very cooperative with the Ministry of Health in Egypt to provide trastuzumab at a 40% of the price for the governmental hospitals. And that's why now in our institutions all over Egypt, we are able to provide trastuzumab in the adjuvant phase for our patients. That's a great step from the Ministry of Health to support this and from Roche to reduce the price. And I wish to tell you that as effective as the 1st of February, accessibility to the reduced price trastuzumab for all patients in every part of Egypt, including the governmental and the private sector, will be provided at 50% of the price. Having said so, I think we have brought good news in terms of science and in terms of economy, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Hamdi, for this elegant presentation. And we still have quite a time for discussion. The floor is open for discussion. Professor Ibtisam. Can we have a microphone, please?
You can use mine here.
وكل مرة يودوه هناك. أهو جاي أهو جاي.
First of all, I would like to thank Professor Hamdi Abdelazim for this very impressive presentation, as we are used to have from him. Actually, Dr. Hamdi, I have 2 questions. You have simplified greatly a very complex issue. But you have mentioned that in the early studies, only 10% of patients have had trastuzumab as an adjuvant treatment.
Yeah.
Nowadays, we know that nearly all patients receive it in the adjuvant setting.
Yeah.
Therefore, as the outcome differs in the metastatic setting with the use of the combination of pertuzumab, trastuzumab in the trastuzumab naive and the prior trastuzumab therapy, should patients who have had trastuzumab in the adjuvant setting be subclassified for whom, when developed metastasis, would have the same combination again?
Yeah.
For example, patients developing metastasis while on the adjuvant 17 cycles, should they have be re-challenged with the same combination blockage, or we have to look for them for another combined anti-HER2 blockage?
Yeah, okay.
That is.
I will answer
okay.
this, and
Please.
then
Okay.
we'll go for your second
Yeah.
question. That's the subgroup analysis. As you can see, that for patients with prior exposure to trastuzumab, the progression-free survival for trastuzumab was less, and for pertuzumab was less, but the hazard ratio all the time was the same. This means that the benefit of adding pertuzumab to trastuzumab, whether the patient received or did not receive, is the same. The hazard ratio is the same. The benefit, the magnitude of benefit is the same, but of course, the progression-free survival is always longer for naive patients, for treatment-naive patients. So to answer your question, I will get back to what was mentioned by Dr. David Cameron, who mentioned that the longer the better. It is, of course, for hormonal treatment, and it is, again, for chemotherapy and for anti-HER2 treatment. If the time to relapse is longer, always your chance to rescue your patient by the same medication, in this case trastuzumab, is higher. If your patient, the one you mentioned, relapses within 1 year, of course, this is a difficult to treat patient. Of course, it's a difficult to treat patients. And in some guidelines, they consider this as first-line failure. You move automatically for second line. The second line for this patient can be T-DM1 or can be the combination of pertuzumab and trastuzumab. We don't have a real study focusing on early relapses because, as you can see, most of the studies, they include a wide variation of clinical behavior of the disease. That's the first question.
Yeah, thanks a lot. نسيت الثاني بس. Okay, Dr. Hamdi, thanks a lot. That's the message I wanted to know and to leave it to everyone, because actually nowadays we use trastuzumab for all patients.
Yes, absolutely. Very relevant.
The second point, Prof. Hamdi, in the neoadjuvant setting for the use of the dual HER2 blockage, patients also develop a patient going into having neoadjuvant treatment and then continuing on trastuzumab. If they develop here relapse before finishing the same course of trastuzumab, should be re-challenging again with pertuzumab added to the trastuzumab in the adjuvant setting. Nowadays, it's not an adjuvant; it is becoming metastatic. Or should we shift to another drug like TGM1 or another combination?
Again, a very difficult question to answer, but it depends. It depends actually on what if the patient actually they had the pathological complete remission. I'm not expecting her to relapse that early after neoadjuvant treatment. You can judge this from the type of response at the time of surgery. If the residual disease after surgery is quite big, then I'm not really surprised to have early relapse. In such case, we know that this patient prognosis is guarded, and in my opinion, she should be treated by TDM1. Okay.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Hamdi. Thanks.
Professor Tahir.
Hamdi, thank you very much for this beautiful talk. First of all, just we are talking about the biology. You know, for the last maybe 3, 4, 5 years, always I am talking about the preferential of HER2 and HER3, even before the pertuzumab issue. And we know now in HER2 disease, to have a progression, you need HER3.
Yeah.
Definitely you need that. And other things, you know, we start believing what we learn in the last 15 years, maybe it is wrong. In terms that, you know, trastuzumab is blocking the HER2, which may not be true, that it is working through the AKT, BI3K, AKT, or through RAS, RAF, MEK, ERK. And I think that I strongly believe that there is some immune modality playing a major role to let the trastuzumab working. Now, my experience with the pertuzumab in the last maybe 2 years, I'm warning everybody in the room, if you start pertuzumab, you have to tell the patient that may you continue for more than 15 months of the combination. Because so far I treated 25 patients. more than 18 months, none of them has progressed. None of them has progressed. I am repeating again.
That's a good news for everybody.
Yeah, this is a good news. That means you have to prepare yourself. And in fact, to answer your question, that patient who is naive, Ya Hamdi, they are doing extremely well. Other things, when you are using pertuzumab, after 9 months, you start seeing a rash. And I don't have good explanation for that, why it is late rather than early.
It's immune-mediated, probably. It's an immune-mediated.
This is maybe another immune-mediated. So basically, in my opinion, that pertuzumab is the breakthrough. And I think that using pertuzumab and trastuzumab in patients with the HER2-positive disease, we are going to see a better survival. I can tell you not much side effect from this combination after you finish docetaxel or weekly paclitaxel, and it is very, very nicely used over 3 weeks. And no cardiac toxicity.
Just to confirm what has been mentioned by Dr. Taher, that is the outcome of the Cleopatra study, and you can see that disease progression was encountered in only 3% of the patients in the Cleopatra study, which is very much mounting to what has been mentioned by Dr. Taher, that disease progression, at least in the initial phase, the initial 6 months of the treatment, you don't see much of disease progression, only less than 5% to safely announce this.
Dr. Hamdi, thank you very much for your presentation. It's always like that. It's very carries and good news. And the good news of today, there are many. The BFS improvement of 6 months, the overall survival of 15 months plus, and the prices of the Herceptin will be for governmental and non-governmental. My question is, do you have an explanation? We always have an improvement in the PFS and another improvement in the overall survival, but they are more or less proportional, or the BFS is a little bit better than. But here we have a 15 months.
Just one slide to explain this. Yes.
We have a 15 months improvement in the overall survival. However, we have only 6 months improvement in the PFS.
Yeah.
Could you explain why? And what about the secondary treatment after failure of the BHB, of the THP?
Yeah.
Please.
May I have one slide, or that's forbidden for today?
Forbidden.
Okay.
Timer.
I wish the slide was already presented during my talk. From the preclinical model, we could see that if you give intrastuzumab naive animals the combination of pertuzumab and trastuzumab, 6 out of 10 treated animals were cured. This did not happen if you give the treatment, the combo, as second line. I have the slide. Thank you. Okay. Very less than a minute, but it doesn't work. Yeah. Here we are. Because sometimes the preclinical data are actually essential for us to understand so many things. That is, in initial combo, like Cleopatra study, okay, here you can cure the animals by the combination. Here, if you introduce the combo after prior trastuzumab treatment, you do something good. The patients will grow like this, the disease will grow like this, but if you introduce pertuzumab plus trastuzumab, you will do something good for the treated animals, but not as impressive as here. Probably that's why if you start early hitting of the HER2-positive disease by the combination, you do something else other than progression-free survival, because you have the durability of response, which is something else. The durability of response can give you another edge for survival. If this theory, if I'm telling you, is true, then we should have a big benefit in the affinity trial, which is the adjuvant phase. I'm not aware they released this. But definitely because the overall survival in the trastuzumab treated arm was 40 months, which is quite long. This means that, and again in the TDM1, this means that you have very good salvage treatment for both arms. Okay.
Professor Heba?
It's not fair enough in the year 2015 to have a young patient with HER2 enriched and you still cannot sponsor her by neoadjuvant. So I'm just taking this chance to put some pressure on Roche and the Ministry of Health that we have to put it as neoadjuvant.
Okay, I fully agree with you, Professor Heba. Thank you so much.
Dr. Hamdi, as regards Herceptin for neoadjuvant, now we are writing the protocols for the protocols now is written for the national protocols for the cancer breast, and now it is added. Herceptin is added in the neoadjuvant setting.
So now the Ministry of Health is supporting the neoadjuvant trastuzumab treatment.
Yes, in the new protocols.
Okay, can I just have a chance to get the last question, Professor Hamdi? And from what Professor Tahir just mentioned, we know that we have different subpopulation within the HER2 population. Some have truncated receptors, some have abnormality in the PI3K, and so on. But still, your message on clinical grounds for the daily practice, which patients should go for chemotherapy plus trastuzumab alone, or a combination of trastuzumab and pertuzumab, or lapatinib, or so? What do you advise for that?
My advice is, if it is based on science, then first-line treatment for all patients should be, if you've been clinical trials, should be a taxane plus pertuzumab and trastuzumab. If it is based on economy and I have a limited budget, of course, I will choose the patients with the most high risk, that's to say the high visceral burden and the younger women and the ER-negative patients. If ever we're going to have a study on pertuzumab, trastuzumab in our country, we have to get this study for a subpopulation of the patients, because we'll never be able to sponsor the study for the whole population.
Okay, with that said, we'd like to thank Professor Hamdi for his elegant presentation, Roche Pharmaceuticals, and the audience. Thank you so much.